Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is another Saturday in October during an election year. It is another huge update here. I'm just going to be going through the full polling data that we've received, and every single poll is in terms of the swing states, basically within a point. If you look at the overall aggregate average, we saw the states in which Trump was leading by over a point get tighter, and we saw the states in which Kamala was leading by a point get tighter. It's very interesting. I think this is very good news for Trump. We've got a lot of other data we can interpret rather than just look at these numbers. Look back at 2016 and 2020, look at the sample. Obviously, the polls, they're not all equal. Some are better than others. We don't really know which ones are going to be the most accurate. We can just look at the historical data and also the overall trends and the enthusiasm with what's going on now, along with the approval rating of each candidate. These polls, though, they are extremely, extremely close. So you do have the national popular vote average right now. That's what we're going to look at. You do have Kamala Harris sitting at plus 1.8. You've got some recent polls that are very, very close. +2 for Harris, +2 for Trump, +1 for Harris. At this point in 2020, pretty remarkable. Joe Biden was sitting at plus 10.2 in a national popular vote. That's a 9-point difference. Now, obviously, 2020 was a different time. You might say, well, the polls have adjusted, but still, it is pretty remarkable how Biden was at plus 10.2 this time in 2020. He ended up winning by around 4. So that was a 6-point polling error. I obviously don't expect that when it comes to the 2024 polls because that would mean a Trump popular victory by around 5 points. But I will say, I do think there will be a slight polling error in Trump's favor when it comes to the popular vote. Trump might only lose the popular vote by around 1. Maybe 1.1 is what I have it at. I know some people think Trump could win the popular vote, and he could because of the improvements he's shown in New York, in New Jersey, in Illinois, extending his lead in Florida, and extending his lead in Ohio. That's going to help the popular vote number, and maybe even taking a state like Virginia, making Minnesota closer, things like that. But if you're Trump, you will take this 100%. You look back at 2016, Hillary was up by 6. She only won by 2, which was a 4-point error. This date in 2016, this date in 2020, it was an even bigger 6-point error. Now you're down by 1.8. If the election finished and there was 0 error on the popular vote, where Trump lost it by 1.8 comma, that would very likely be an electoral college victory for Trump. Although the votes are going to be a little bit different because Trump is going to make up significant ground in New York, New Jersey, states like that. It's not going to be the crazy, like we saw in 2020 where Trump lost the popular vote by 4 points. That was because liberals ran up huge numbers in California, New York, New Jersey. That's not necessarily going to happen. It will still happen to a lesser degree like California. Trump lost it by 27 points. He might only lose it this cycle by 21 or 22. You're making up voters, in terms of the popular vote, but you're not gaining any electoral votes. So it's going to be a little bit different. There is a potential chance where Kamala could win the popular vote by 2 and still win the election. Obviously, in 2020, that environment, it was not going to happen just because of the margins that we saw. But I'm just saying, if we did see something like where it was a 1.8-point victory for Kamala, I would feel very comfortable that that would be an electoral college victory for Trump. The margins would be very close. But when it comes to the popular vote, you look at the betting right now. It's about a 75% to 70% chance Harris wins the popular vote. It's gone down about 5 percentage points, like most of Harris's betting numbers have recently. That's the big story. The betting is trending heavily in Trump's direction. The polls are getting very, very close, but the betting is where Trump is doing really well. You look at Arizona, and we'll just go state by state. You can see there was that New York Times, Siena poll that had some weird data off of that, especially off of the Pennsylvania poll. It does help Trump in the average in Arizona. He's sitting at +1 in Arizona. I do like where Trump is at this point. He was up around 2 points. It's kind of gotten closer. There have been some closer polls, I guess, just in terms of Trump +1, Trump +2, Harris +2, the Wall Street Journal. But I think Trump is looking very, very good in Arizona, and he's polling a lot better than he was in 2020 than he was in 2016. And to me, Arizona is a more Republican state anyway, and I do think Donald Trump will win Arizona. The New York Times poll, again, it's disappointing because they released Pennsylvania as well, and they had Harris up 4, and the sample was pretty ridiculous. But, for Arizona, it is a good poll. Taking a look at Nevada, this is another state where Trump getting that Wall Street Journal poll really helps him out. Basically, a tie in terms of the overall average. Pretty interesting. This date in 2020, Biden was sitting at +6. Everyone always says how Nevada Republicans get overestimated. Well, not in 2020. At least not on October 12th in 2020. I do think that Trump could win this state. Nevada is the least important swing state out of the 7 because it only has 6 electoral votes. But I do think Trump is probably going to win the state by around 0.4 to 0.5. The margin is going to be razor thin. I'm projecting when it comes to that, either way, even if Trump loses it, you're talking about 306 electoral votes versus 312 if he's able to sweep all the other swing states. It's not that big of a deal if he does lose this one. There was more positive polling for Kamala, there's no doubt about it. She was up by around a point for about half a month. She was leading most of the polls. But you get that Trump plus 6. Liberals could say, well, that's an outlier. But in general, it's not like Harris was up by 5 anyway. Plus 1, plus 1, plus 1. I mean, it's a very, very close state. That's really all I can say about that Wisconsin. Harris sitting not even up half a point. The last 3 polls have all been ties, which is pretty crazy. In Wisconsin, the betting is trending in Trump's direction. I think Wisconsin is going to go to Trump, possibly by an even bigger margin than Pennsylvania, certainly by a bigger margin than Michigan. We did get a Quinnipiac poll that had Trump plus 2. In 2020, this would have been unheard of. You look at the polling errors we've seen with Biden plus 6 in October in 2020. That's a significant polling error. He ended up only winning by 3. That's a 6-point polling error. In 2016, we saw over a 6-point polling error because Trump won Wisconsin in 2016 and lost it in 2020. You're looking at very, very close polling based off of how Wisconsin has been in terms of their inaccuracies polling Trump supporters. I think this is going to be a very good election victory for Trump in Wisconsin. Harris sitting at plus 3. You're talking about polling errors of 6 points in both 2020 and 2016. You don't need a 6-point polling error, you just need a 2-point polling error. You need like a half-point polling error, honestly. But if you want to win relatively comfortably, you get a 2-point polling error, and you win this state by around 1.7. It seems like it's checking out really well for Trump there when you look at the data. You move on to Michigan. Trump is sitting at plus 0.9. It's pretty crazy because this was the state, and I'll show you guys. Look at this. Harris was up when they started to really ramp her up, and you had the DNC and everything like that. This was the Rust Belt state that they were saying, we're up by 2.5, we're going to win this state. You're getting Jill Stein possibly helping Trump out. Jill Stein winning the Muslim vote, and remember back in 2016, Jill Stein got 1% of the vote. Trump ended up winning the state by 3%. Very narrow. Every little bit helps. Jill Stein can help Donald Trump in this state. Insider advantage was great in 2020. They've got Trump plus 2. They were barely off with their polls. Emerson's got it as a tie, Quinnipiac has Trump plus 4, and Wall Street Journal has Harris plus 2. But a lot of these polls recently show Trump with the lead, which is pretty remarkable. Trump is taking the lead in Michigan based on even the polling average, and this is another state that has underestimated Trump in the past. You had Biden plus 7. You had Hillary almost plus 10. Trump won Michigan in 2016, so that's a 10-point polling error this date in 2016 relative to what actually happened in terms of the final result. Pretty crazy there. Again, another state where it seems like the data checks out based on the previous Trump elections, where Trump is sitting in a very, very good spot in Michigan. You could say he's up by a point, but also you have to factor in the errors that we've seen in 2020 and 2016. So it's an even better spot to where he might be up by around 2 or 3. I'm not saying we're going to get the same error where it's going to be a crazy 7 or 8-point error. Trump's not going to win the state by 7 or 8, but he might get some more breathing room if he's up, or even if he's down by 1. It's still good news for Trump in Michigan. Moving on to Pennsylvania. Wow. Even with that New York Times poll? Or did they not input it? Oh, I guess it was only a Harris plus 3 poll. Maybe because they had the leaners, but Trump is sitting at plus 0.1. Basically 50-50ths. I mean, you do have Trump leading 3 out of the last 4 polls. There was a Quinnipiac plus 2, but even these, most of these polls show Trump leading. That Bloomberg poll, is it still in the average? Harris plus 5. Oh great, Bloomberg is going to give another update, but if they do, it's probably only going to be a Harris plus 2 or plus 3, I'm guessing. You take a look at this date in 2020. Trump overperformed Pennsylvania very easily. Plus 7 for Biden. He ended up only winning it by 1. He won Pennsylvania. Hillary was sitting plus 9. The polling errors we've seen in Pennsylvania with Trump in basically a tie situation suggest a very, very probable Trump victory in Pennsylvania at this point. Another state that looks very, very good for Trump. Moving on to North Carolina, you do have Trump sitting at plus 0.5. Again, a lot of these states are very, very close, but he is leading in all these polls. You've got a tie from Wall Street Journal. You've got insider advantage. Trump plus 1, plus 1, plus 2, plus 1, plus 1, plus 2. So he's leading all these polls. it is very, very close. You still have that Atlas Intel poll in the aggregate. Once that gets knocked off, Trump's probably going to go up to around a 1-point lead in terms of the average. We'll see. I think Atlas is probably going to be coming out with another poll. In 2020, Biden was sitting plus 2.7. Trump won the state in 2020 by 1.3 comma, so he outperformed that by around 4 points. So, another state that checks out beautifully for Trump, plus 0.5. You're talking about a favorable polling error in 2020 and also 2016. He also won the state in 2016 by around 3 points. The polls had Hillary up by around 2.5 points, so another state that checks out there. Moving on to Georgia, you are looking at Trump, another one very, very close, sitting at plus half a point. The polls were very, very accurate in Georgia this time of year. As you can see, Biden was sitting at plus 0.4 on this date. Now, this is just, hypothetical. It doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, they're going to be very accurate on October 12th, 2024, because they were very accurate on October 12th, 2020. But it is interesting. Biden's average was plus 0.4, and he won by plus 3. Now Trump is sitting at plus 0.5. I do think Trump is probably... You can see Trump was up 1.5 there. I don't know. Was it that Fox News poll that really changed it? Or maybe there was a poll that got taken out of the aggregate. Some of these polls that had Trump up by 4 and 3 got taken out, I guess. But in general, I would say this is another one. I think Georgia is going to be pretty close, but it looks good for Trump. When you look at the betting, Georgia is looking really good for Trump. North Carolina is looking really good for Trump. Arizona is looking really good for Trump. That's the 3 that are looking really good, over a 60% chance. When you talk about Nevada, it's basically 50-50. You talk about Wisconsin, it's basically 50-50. Michigan, you could even argue. I know Trump recently went ahead. It's basically 50-50. But Trump, maybe 51. Pennsylvania, Trump like a 55% chance. Trump is looking good in all of these states right now. The polling is checking out. If we went into election night like this, we're looking amazing for a Trump victory. Amazing. So, listen, if these stay relatively the same, bunched up like this, it's going to be very, very good for Trump. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video.